Welcome to Mentoring 37 on February the 5th, 2019. This is a TV radio show for all things mentoring, and it's about mentoring for the world. And there are two people on the show with you, and that is myself. I'm Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I'm the Director of Certification for the International Mentoring Community. And we also have Doug Lawrence, who's the Director of Education for the International Mentoring Community. So you can gather Mentoring 37 is brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. Now, the great thing about this call is that there are three parts to it. First is an education element. Second is answering a question from the field or from the community itself. And the third part is updates. And as we go and move along with Mentoring 37, we're going to be inviting people like yourself to the show because maybe you have a question or you have a great idea that you want to share with us. And some of those are going to be live, and we'll be able to give you when that is. Sometimes they'll be taped because both Doug and I find ourselves in different parts of the country, and we may not be able to put this together live at the time. But we're always looking at a Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain is when we're going to be doing it. So let's get into the show, into the podcast. So one of the things that we do is we always read our definition of mentoring. And then what will happen is we'll take a small little excerpt, a couple of the words from that definition, and have a quick conversation about them. Now, I'm going to have Doug read it, and then Doug will explain a couple of the words, and then I might put in some ideas as well before we get going. So, Doug, over to you.
All right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome to Mentor 37. What I want to do now is just give you our definition of mentoring, and to sort of set the stage for you on why are you playing with the definition for mentoring. There has been a paradigm shift that has taken place over the last couple of years that I've been following and actually providing our input into what the definition of mentoring should be. So mentoring is about a two-way, trusted arrangement in which the mentor and mentee can form a deeper and richer collaborative alliance, resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally. Now that's a lot of words to try and digest in that. So what we're going to do is we'll break it down. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about two-way. So what does two-way mean? And the other part is trusted. So in a two-way relationship, and maybe the best way is for me to go back to what we call the traditional style of mentoring, which is the more senior individual passing on their wisdom and knowledge by telling somebody, I've done it this way for X amount of years, so therefore you should go forward and do it that same way. In a two-way relationship, there is that collaborative interchange or exchange of ideas back and forth. And it's more engaging, it's actually a lot deeper and richer, as the definition would say. And then the other part is part of that two-way relationship or that two-way arrangement is the establishment of trust. And what I have been able to determine in all the mentoring that I do is that if I'm not able to establish the trust, then I don't have an arrangement. And what ends up happening is both of us, the mentor and the mentee, end up wandering aimlessly about with no real sense of where they need to go or where they want to be able to go. So having that trust is one of the foundational elements of actually having a great mentoring arrangement in place. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree, and one of the words there obviously is trusted, and that is an ethical value that we talk about very richly, deeply. That's the kind of language that we use. The two-way is very much, I use my hands all the time. You probably notice my hands pop up if you're watching the video aspect of this. because there's this notion of the mentor and mentee and how you work together, right? There has to be the trust, or else what happens is one hand misses the other hand versus the two hands come together and sort of meld into each other because of the conversation. So I think we've covered off that one. So let's just take a look at why Mentoring 37 and what's the format behind it. I mentioned earlier the notion of education, answering a question, and updates. But also it's about sharing at least 7 good nuggets in the education part. And if we can move it, 7 good nuggets into the answering the question from the field, and to bring up 7 good points out of the updates if we can. That's what we're doing. So there's the 3 elements and the 7, 7, 7. So that's where we get 37. And we make a commitment not to go more than 37 minutes. The other part to this is that we're doing this to build community. Now, at the opening, I said, all things mentoring, about mentoring for the world. We're wanting to take this out around the world. This is not just about Doug and I bringing this out. It's about us working with you to be able to say, how would you like to advance mentoring? Like, I know that I would like to advance what's called facilitative mentoring. Maybe some of you want to take a look at youth mentoring. Some of you may want to take a look at mentoring in the workplace. These are all elements that we want to bring out in the community. And therefore, we're looking at doing co-creation. That's an important element of this. Doug and I are forever in this co-creation because that's how we build up courses. We build up the way forward in the international mentoring community, which is probably a great bridge into one of the very first things that we want to talk about, is one of the action outcomes from the Certificate of Competence profile. So one of the things that we do in the international mentoring community is that we offer certification in what's called the Certificate of Competence Mentor. In other words, we work to help you get a certificate that says that you are competent as a mentor. In other words, you understand the concepts and you understand the practices, and both of those light up your understanding of mentoring and serving as a mentor. So on today's show, what we're going to do is take a look at the action outcome, discuss the mentor's behavior congruent with the ethical standards in the mentoring arrangement. Now, again, on first brush, you're going, hang on a minute, that's a lot of words there. So I want to read it again. Discuss the mentor's behavior congruent, consistent with the ethical standards in the mentoring arrangement. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break this down, make some points, and then, I'll certainly ask Doug to jump in here and see where we go with it. Now, I'm going to do something a little different because a lot of people will start at the beginning and move to the end. I'm going to go at the end and move back to the beginning, and I'm going to start with mentoring arrangement. And what I'm talking about there, and what we're talking about as you learn about this in your certificate, is that the mentoring arrangement is the structure that you set in motion to be able to work together, the mentor and the mentee working together. There's a structure here, and it's an agreed upon structure, so we call that the mentoring arrangement. Now, there is a relationship that exists, but we're talking about the structuring, so it tends to lean more into the word how. How do you structure that up? And through more of our times together here on Mentoring 37, we'll be talking more deeply and richly about the mentoring arrangement itself. But I wanted to take a look at this notion of ethical standards. Now, standards is, again, agreed upon ways. It's sort of like, these are the standards that we're going to work from. We used to think of this as like the policies and procedures manual. These are the standards that we work from. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, these are the things that we've agreed to work according to, and they're ethically connected, so the ethical values. And the ethical values vary. We work with 7. So there's accountability, caring, community, fairness, respect, trust, and hospitality. Again, we're going to learn more about these as we go along, but as you know, in our definition, we have this notion of trusted. So we've already spoken a little bit about that, but we're going to go into that aspect of the ethical standards in another show. But the notion is those ethical values are there, and it's what is sort of, in a sense, an element of the glue that holds that mentoring arrangement together. And when we know those ethical standards, then that mentoring arrangement is going to benefit from that. But to be able to do that, one of the things about the mentoring arrangement is that that is more coming from the mentor than the mentee. The mentor leans in, oh, let's make sure that the structure of this is working, where the mentee would lean a little bit more into the relationship working. So from a structure, the how, the mentor wants to hold the space, that's a term we can use, hold the space for the conversation to take place, and is going to be very aware of the ethical standards that are there. That's why the behavior of the mentor is so important in this mentoring arrangement. You, as a mentor, have to come from this place of ethical standards. And if you don't, it will show up very quickly and will influence the mentoring arrangement and the mentoring relationship. Now, the concept here that's really important is congruence. The idea that what you say is what you do, it's in alignment, it's repeatable. That's what we mean about the behavior. So when you walk into your mentoring arrangement with the person, whether it's in the coffee shop, in a room, on a walk, wherever it might be, there's consistency, there's a congruence of your behavior as you go about doing what you're doing. Doug, anything to add to this part?
Well, as we're going through and I'm listening to the definition and that you've provided, a story actually popped into my mind, and it fits quite nicely into this whole action outcome statement. So I'm just going to really quickly take people, the listeners, through it. So I was brought into an organization to work with a particular individual who, from a behavior standpoint, according to the organization, we needed to be able to generate a behavior difference, a change in behavior. So part of looking at it certainly from this action outcome is I needed to be able to, as part of that mentoring arrangement, to be able to create that safe environment for a conversation to take place. I needed to build that level of, and so when I listened to, certainly going through and talking about the behavior being congruent, the processes that I used had to be consistent, mentoring session after mentoring session after mentoring session. If I were to deviate from that path, it would then become, in that individual's mind, the environment in which the arrangement was taking place would no longer be safe, and the element of trust, I would have damaged that element of trust. And so we went through this process. There were a number of different root causes for the behavior that we were able to address. And I was able to witness I call it a remarkable behavioral change that took place as a result of, number one, the congruency that I put into place to make sure that this was repeatable session after session, that I was able to build that safe place, that safe environment, and that I built and maintained a level of trust that continues even to this day. Even though I'm not there, we still stay in touch periodically, and the trust is there. So that's kind of gives you an example from a practical aspect as to, when we look at the behavior of the mentor and it needing to be congruent, and it also needs to be mindful and practicing ethical standards.
Yeah, it's so true, and it's easy to slip up sometimes because you might go, well, I think what we'll do is we'll go a little bit more informal today when formality needs to continue on just a little bit longer. I think that's to your point of that example that you just gave. So thanks for that. All right. Now, what this does is it also brings up is that while this is an educational presentation we just shared, there are aspects of people asking questions from the field. And Doug is really great. He goes out and looks at Quora, which is a place where people ask questions. We also get people send us questions in through our contact page, and people emailing us, or even just chatting with other people that we know. They'll ask us questions. And so, Doug, you chose something, a question from where, and what was this question this time?
Well, where I got it from was from someone who obviously had a question about mentoring, and they submitted it on Quora, and I get notified every time there's questions about mentoring, and I try to respond to as many as I possibly can. So the question that was posed is, what people skills have you learned from a mentor? And so I kind of struggled with it initially because I'm so accustomed to coming at this from the aspect of being the mentor, but here I was being asked as to, as a mentee, what have I learned? And then the definition of mentoring jumped into my mind, and I went, well, just a minute. It's a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee are going to learn and grow personally and professionally. So a lot of my learnings as a mentor would also apply as a mentee. And so let me share some of those. So I see everyone as a unique individual. And by that, I therefore say that I need to tailor my mentoring, how I deliver my mentoring. It is tailored to that particular individual's needs. Now, when we look at people skills from a leadership perspective, one of the things that I always talk to people about is that to be a great leader, you need to be able to tailor how you lead to each individual person, because everyone is unique. So the mentoring and the leadership kind of go hand in hand, and so do the people skills around that as well. Another aspect of what have I learned from my mentor, and that also goes from the aspect of what have I as a mentor practiced. That is the aspect of effective communication. And so I look at it from there's communication and then there's effective communication. So taking it to the next level. So it's all about, active listening. So listening and hearing. It's about listening for trigger words in a conversation. It's about listening for deflections. It's about pausing before you speak so that you can ask yourself the question very quickly, how is what I'm about to say, how is that going to be received by the person on the other end of the conversation? So that's a number of different things that I have learned, and it's been, as I said, it's been two ways. So it's been as a mentee and as a mentor. Anything that you could add to that?
No, I think it's a great question. Sometimes we pass that one by, and I so enjoyed your response. And it's a deep reflective question. It's a deep reflective question. And when you get into this, and if we link this more to the professional, quasi-professional storyline of what we do, it is really helpful to reflect on what you learned from your mentor, what you're learning from your mentee, what you're learning from your own self-awareness. Is do not move past this notion of reflection in action and reflection on action. Those are so important. And again, this will become more evident, right? As we talk about things, as you get involved in the course, as you get involved in the community, you're going to learn more and more about this. So I think it was a great choice for today's call. So thanks for that, Doug. Appreciate it.
Good.
Okay. So what we want to do is move over into the world of the updates. And there's a lot of different aspects of mentoring, this notion of all things mentoring for the world that we want to bring forward. So I'm just going to start off with the world of certification. I mentioned at the onset, we, through the international mentoring community, provide the certification of Certificate of Competence Mentor. In other words, you can get recognized, verified, competent by a verifier, in other words, a third-party person, to say, yep, looks like your portfolio, your documentation, your logbook of what you've done, your answers to case reviews, your indication of where you've learned what you've learned, all lines up with the ability for us to acknowledge, to verify you as competent as a mentor, which then says there's a recertification process that goes with that. Now, what Doug and I have done is we went, hang on, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. So the web page is getting a little bit of an update because we don't want to put a barrier of money in front of all people. So the self-assessment of the certificate can be at $0, or if you want to help us out to keep things moving forward, it could be $17, $27, or $37 Canadian. So you have an opportunity to do your self-assessment, find out where you are, and then book a consultation, a conversation with Doug, and he can help you to figure out where you go from there. So that's a little bit about the certification part. Is there anything from education that you want to mention, Doug?
The only thing I would add is that the benefit that our listeners would get from, certainly from the education perspective, by being part of the community, is the aspect that I'm continually refreshing how the mentoring process and the mentoring concepts and all of those elements in my daily mentoring session. So and you actually mentioned the whole reflection piece. And I do a lot of reflecting. So after every mentoring, before I enter into a mentoring session and then after a mentoring session, I always reflect. And so I take away from that reflection some learnings which may require that I adjust how I deliver mentoring concepts and techniques. It may require that I have to adjust those. And so then that becomes part of the education material that we then can provide back to the community. So I guess where I'm heading with this is that our listeners need to understand, I guess, that our education is continuing to evolve, where we're looking for best practices, what works well, what doesn't work well, what do we need to do differently in order to continue to enhance and maintain that deeper, richer mentoring experience.
And what we also do is we take excerpts out of this video show podcast and we put them into the course material as well, and we keep updating it. So we leave the older versions there because there's usually some nuggets. Doug and I would agree that, no, this video has to leave. Okay, we'll take it out. Yeah. We will agree to that. But as the community moves along, we're going to be asking the community to get more involved, because there's always going to be nuances to each one of the action outcome statements, of which there's 68 that make up the Certificate of Competence Mentor. So we're looking to invite you in and to get involved with that. And it's going to be fun, as we keep improving upon the education process. Now, there is an event that's coming up. I'm putting it on. It's a webinar that connects managing and leading and being an extraordinary mentor. It's on February the 13th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And you can find information on the blog at wealthmovement.com what you're able to do is you can find that the information on wealthmovement.com /wealth-blog. That information is underneath the video. You'll be able to see it here, and you can go there to get that those details. Now, the other thing is that sometimes, Doug, you're running events. Do you have anything coming up that you want to let everyone know about at this point?
Well, I don't have certainly any podcasts or anything like that. I do run every 2 weeks a mentoring circle, but that's definitely very geographically challenging, I guess, for most folks to be able to. Some do try, but it is definitely challenging. So the mentoring circle is something where like-minded individuals gather and we talk about mentoring processes and mentoring concepts. And a lot of the conversations go very, very deep. So we get into some topics that are quite philosophical, quite deep. So that's, for the audience that's listening in, if that's something that you're interested in, we can work with you to help you set up your own mentoring circle in, whatever geographical space you're occupying. And you'll be quite surprised at how rewarding it is, to sit down with like-minded people, but my job is to facilitate the dialogue, the conversation. And what ends up happening is there has never been a time when people have left at the end of the session, have left and have not taken something home with them. So it's a great technique for people to put into practice to enhance not only their mentoring, but also those that are part of their community as well.
So yours is out of Regina. The circle is in Regina at this point in time. And below the video here, you'll see talentc.ca /blog, and you'll be able to find information out there as well. But also at the end of the video, there are ways to contact Doug and I if you want to pursue anything that we've just mentioned. The other thing that is going to happen in March is we're looking to build a community platform, a place for community to gather to learn all things mentoring, mentoring for the world, as supported by the international mentoring community. So our next show, which is on February the 19th, will mention that platform and where you can access it. But again, always connect to our blogs. You can always find things there as well. And sometimes what we do in the show notes underneath the video, if you're looking at it at YouTube, you can find it, the information there as well. Now, Doug, you went through the C of C.
Correct.
Right? You went through the process and you experienced what it was like to be verified. If you were to give a quick testimonial, right, in sort of like 30 seconds, no more than a minute, about your experience, what would be that nugget that you would want to share with everyone about that experience?
So for me, what it did in going through the C of C, the Certificate of Competence Mentor, what it did for me was it gave me a deeper, richer appreciation of the mentoring process and mentoring concepts. And that then translates into a deeper, richer mentoring experience for the people that I spend time with in a mentoring arrangement. And so a lot of people going through that process who have never done a lot of mentoring, using that as an example, will be quite surprised at what is actually involved in being a mentor. And, sort of the knowledge level that's required in order to understand the mentoring process and the mentoring concepts. There's a lot to it.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to scare people away by any stretch. It's just that what you will find is it will start you on your journey of going through what I call the hierarchy of mentoring. So starting off as a mentor, moving to a great mentor, and then eventually becoming an extraordinary mentor. And going through that certification process starts to propel you on that journey of getting to where I think we all eventually want to be, and which is that extraordinary mentor.
For sure. And that brings up a point that we've created, in that we've created a position called Journey Mentor. And Doug would be one of the Journey Mentors, having gone through it himself. It's an optional element. We always will encourage you to do the Journey Mentors, have someone to journey with you as you go through your certificate of competence. So we'll talk more about that as time goes by as well. And we've got a couple of registrants in the certificate of competence now, so they're moving through. So hopefully we'll have a few more testimonials soon to share with you about what's going on. And we did graduate a couple of other people from a knowledge-based program. And at some point in time, we can explain a little bit more about, if all you want is just the knowledge, you don't want to necessarily go into full practice, we do have a way to help you out there as well. So, Doug, there's an element of, you are really look at, Doug, there's an element of your work where you play with the mentoring in the workplace program. I'm really interested in making a connection between managers and leaders who are mentoring and parents and grandparents who are mentoring, and how managers and leaders are parents and grandparents, and there's that connection there. So managing, leading in the workplace, but parents and grandparents about involving their children and grandchildren in the out of doors, and how to use mentoring in that capacity. So I've explained a little bit more about mine, but your mentoring in the workplace work, just a brief introduction to that. What's going on there?
So the mentoring in the workplace. So a couple different things that we do with organizations is, number one, there's probably the primary one that I see that's coming to the forefront is what sort of a mentoring service I call mentoring versus termination. And so that's definitely one of the things that's taking place. So mentoring is being used to foster a behavior change for an employee that is being considered for termination. And so that just demonstrates, for me, the power of mentoring, especially from a behavioral change perspective, being able to, and the example that I used earlier was certainly that particular one. What I'm also seeing is mentoring is, I just found out, I didn't know that, but the local university here actually teaches a course on leadership and mentoring. And I've been asked to come in and actually speak at the course to the students sometime in March. And I've looked at the curriculum, and it's actually, for me, it's very rewarding to see that somebody actually understands the true value that mentoring can bring to an organization. Because now we're training the leaders, the future leaders of tomorrow. Now we're actually training them in what mentoring can actually do for them in a workplace situation. A couple of the other things. Certainly one that I do is looking at doing a workplace assessment to determine whether an organization is actually mentor ready. And so that, is certainly something else where, you go through a process, and I won't get into the whole drawn out process, but at the end of the day, it helps identify whether an organization is actually ready to implement mentoring, or if it would end up being a lost opportunity, for lack of a better choice of words, to enhance the workplace culture that's there today.
Great. So again, there's a connection between what Doug and I do. One of them is around managing and leading and facilitating mentoring. There's a connection there. So as we draw today's show to a close, thank you, everyone. And we're going to invite you, whether you come in as a guest, ask a question, let's get involved. If you're picking up this, it doesn't have to be Doug and I only. We invite people to come in, and especially when we go live, then there'll be a great opportunity for you to get involved with it. So today's show was really about discuss the mentor's behavior congruent with ethical standards in the mentoring arrangement. That was the education part. There is a quorum question about what did you learn from your mentor, and some updates for you. So just to let you know, where we're going next week is manage issue identification to the mentoring arrangement. And issue is a very important word. You'll notice it wasn't manage problem identification. It was issue identification, and we're very particular in our use of that in the international mentoring community. So with that, again, wealthmovement.com/wealth-blog, talentc.ca/blog is where you want to jump in and learn more. That gives you access to our websites as well. So with that, I'm going to say take care to you, and I'm going to give Doug the final out as we close up the show. So Doug?
Well, thank you, everybody, and make every minute a mentoring minute.